Yes, so what's up with the what's up? So we are going into the school district of Philadelphia. Why? Because there's a lot of things going on with the school district of Philadelphia. But I want to tie it all the way into way back in the day, right? So I'm gonna go to Google and I'm gonna put in I don't know how to get this right. Let me see. Let me just talk to it. Allow while visiting, yeah. Now they're gonna have my voice all the time. Yo, can you hear me, Google? Wait a minute. Yo, look up the letter that the government wrote to the teachers when they started the school system and how they changed the curriculum from land and growing your own to dependent on companies. Did it work? What the fuck? Bruh. Bruh, what the All right, well, you know what? Wait. So first I gotta see how I get make this work. Two times. Okay. The letter the government wrote to the teachers to change the curriculum. Damn. Dear colleague, letter issued on February. No. U.S. Department of Education. See, this is no. Does federal government? No. See, we gotta go change the curriculum in the 1800s. Government-led effort to change the school curriculum in the 1800s was driven by Horace Mann in Massachusetts during the late 1830s and 1840s. At the first secretary of the Massachusetts board, starting Mann wrote numerous reports, lectures, and letters to campaign for common schools, standardized text. Wait, because shout out to Horace now. So we had a Horace back then in the 18. Do y'all know Horace now that we got? I want to see a picture of this Horace guy. The Common School Movement, man, and we got a school called Man like that, advocated for a shift away from diverse locally controlled schoolhouses towards no, that's not what I'm talking about. England Elementary signal massive change with politicians like overseeing move. All right, so let me go to YouTube and try to find this because, but I do want to see more about this Horace brother. Horace, man, online, only a teacher teaching timeline who worked to improve American education. Horace, man, worked. So this Horace of American education. Wait till I tell him. Oh wait, y'all can't see all that. When I go to another page, I forgot. Y'all can only see this page, so I can't go to another page. All right, let me just go to YouTube though, cause YouTube gonna do it better, or at least I can. I'm a YouTube searcher. Like I never really was a Google searcher. I always went to to YouTube to search everything. And so this I'll be able to find it. I'm gonna go to my channel. I'm gonna go to my old videos that I watched already, if they can show me history. Yeah, nigga, we had to see what's going on with them gats. No, text say go is the reason why I did that. You feel me? Let's just go past, of course, my camera stuff. I fell asleep to this, so I don't remember hearing none of these. I fell asleep to this one right here. And I think I was woke for this one too. What was that one? Yeah, I might have been woke for that one. No, because this was like yesterday. Something else. Dolo, shout out to Do. All right, it's going to be KKK Keisha, KK Keisha. It was a nice job about, here we go, last school teacher who taught the original.
Own a vacation rental? If it's not listed on Booking.com, it's invisible to millions of travelers on our platform.
So now this is about how they stopped teaching the things that you can learn. That sounds crazy. But no, they stopped teaching about how to be yourself, how to do stuff on your own. They stopped telling the history on how people can do stuff on their own. Look at all these nut ass commercials.
American classroom instruction shifted so dramatically in such a short window? The same question keeps pulling me deeper, but the further I went into those state archives, the more...
Wait, let's read what this say. It say, in considering future path, the necessity of teaching historical truth must come first. We must use the past, not run from it, nor build it up, only needs. And when we must seek the highest discipline, not merely from an institution, from an instruction, but also from observations and discussions about history, to paraphrase our youth, to prepare our youth for the ahead. If a nation knows not the story of its past, it must not just blindly believe it to have no purpose that fails, and we left with the nothing. The time is now to speak, not remain silent in myths.
more I realized the textbooks weren't the real story. The teachers were.
Approved curriculum, civics and industry, duties of the citizen, not law of self. Do you see the difference from teaching land over here? You got they didn't erase it, but it's a land and stuff like that. Teaching nature, teaching self, or duties of a citizen. They got you thinking different ways. They got national progress through industries. They basically trying to tell you that going through the industries is what's better. So that's why everybody is working to get stuff on their resume to go get a job from somebody, not working to go and do what they need to do. Again, when they closed down the school, the box school down the corner, you know what they did? Because when you look up, back then they had trades in the school. So when stuff happened in the neighborhood, you could just go outside. You could just call your friend that got a son that go there. Like, don't your son go to box? Hey, what trade he in? Do he? And they'll know somebody that knows somebody that can come and they'll help you out. They don't want that. You know what I'm saying? They need you in their unions. They need you going through their stuff. They need you working for them, paying them, right? Because they got your student loans. So you got to pay. So at the end of the day, if you in debt, everything that you get paid isn't profit, isn't anything. You working for free. If even with taxes, with all of this, with everything. You know what I mean? So let's not get that deep. But this is what we're saying. The respect for authority. That's what they teaching. Importance of central governance, right? So basically saying like depend on the government. I think it's so crazy all the time when people like follow, the Bible and things like that. It's like, didn't Jesus go against the government? But they find somewhere in the Bible where it say follow the government. Like back when COVID was here, and I'm like, I don't know. And that's a whole other different story. But yeah, this is what they teaching.
Because the teachers remembered what was there before, and a few of them wrote it down.
Official notice by order of the Board of Education, effective immediately. All teaching, discussion, or instruction regarding economic history of land, re- redistribution, and wealth concentration is strictly prohibited in all classrooms. Any teacher found violating this directive will face immediate dismissal. Signed, the district superintendent. So what is this saying right here? Effective in all teaching, discussion, or instruction regarding the economic history of land. So don't talk about who had the land first. Don't talk about how the damn factory is on a graveyard. No, just talk about how the factory is going to help your family grow because you can work there and make money to pay your bills, working for free because they made the bills. See, that was the whole thing in the old world. When we get to all the old world stuff, and we already did the trains a little bit. If y'all look at the last live, we talked about trains and getting to places. Now, all of these things was free. You feel me? Doing good, that's what it was. You was able to go different places and different things like that. Lights and electricity and gas, all that stuff was like, it came from nature. But when you mess up nature and you can tamper with nature, that's how it goes.
What Edna Morse was told to stop saying was not radical. It was not dangerous by any reasonable measure. It was simply the economic history that American schoolchildren had been taught for the better part of 3 decades. The mechanics of how money was created, the historical relationship between land ownership and poverty, the documented record of who benefited when currency.
Okay, Edna Morse's final lesson plan, October 14, 1919. History of land ownership and stewardship. Right? They don't want to teach you stewardship. Pre-colonial indigenous concepts of communal land use. That's what I'm saying when I'm like, oh, that was a graveyard, but now it's a factory. They don't want you to know that was a graveyard. They want you to just worry about it being a factory now. The importance of the Homestead Act on Western territories. Definitely look that up. This obsession and the Dawes Act. Dawes and all of that is so now with both of these we getting into the natives is pretty much what it is. I didn't want to go into the Homestead Act and all that, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with one or two things. It has to do with them kicking the natives out and then like I'm saying when they got rid of them natives, those immigrants that came, because that's what they were, right? Those, I don't know, maybe they was Italian, maybe they was fucking Alaskan, maybe they was England, maybe they was whatever everybody that's here, right? German or something like that. Whenever they came and take over, the fires were still hot. You feel me? Like people keep thinking that the natives didn't live in houses. Like they still lived in houses and everything. They just came in and took over the houses. That's all. What it was already there. Some things they took down. You know what I'm saying? But yeah.
Policy changed and who bore the cost.
But the Dawes Act is basically saying who is native, who is white, who is a freedman, and all of that. And then it's like a census back then, basically. And so like that's how people were seeing if they was native or not. But the whole thing is, majority of the time, if you on the Dawes Act, you on there because you fake. Like, you feel me? Because the Dawes is the person that, and shout out to my man Samuel C. Dawes is the guy that was saying, yeah, it was saying that we should bring immigrants in to teach them what Indians do. And we basically like how now we got the school district of Philadelphia, but it's like, yeah, when people come over here, they still can go to the school district of Philadelphia, just like the kids. So it's really like no difference. So he was basically saying like, we're going to let all these people in. But what they really was doing was bringing in these immigrants to learn from our natives. And now these immigrants can be the real natives. So now they can be the faces. So now when they turn around and say like, this white man is a native, remember $5 Indian, then they're the authority. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but yeah, it's crazy.
These were not opinions. They were the curriculum. And in 1901, across the country, quietly and without public announcement, they began to disappear. The timing was not accidental. 1901 was the year William McKinley was assassinated and Theodore Roosevelt took the presidency. It was the year United States Steel was incorporated as the largest corporation in the history of the world, capitalized at $1.4 billion, a figure that exceeded the entire annual revenue of the federal government. It was the year that the consolidation of American industrial and financial power that had been building for 3 decades reached a kind of completion. And the question of what American school children should understand about how that consolidation had occurred became for the first time a question that the men who had accomplished it had both the motive and the institutional means to answer. To understand why 1901 matters, you have to go back to 1879.
This game, you're not ready for it.
That was the year Henry George published Progress and Poverty, an examination.
Remembering Etna, lessons on land and inequality, those lessons shaped my understanding of American history and how wealth is built. I'll never forget the impact she had on us. Right. See, now that's the thing. And that's what they don't want. Remembering Edna Marcy's lessons on land and inequality, those lessons shaped my understanding of American history and how wealth is built. That's it. So back then, they would have knew not to go to a company because another company is just another man's wealth. Build and work and do your own. That's what they was taught. Get your own land and do stuff on your own land. Here, it's like, go. Ain't no damn land. You can live over here in an apartment, pay this rent. You can buy that house, but what the fuck is you buying? You can't. It's not land. You can't even start a fire in front of your house. Go try. Yeah, I bought this house. Then let me do a bonfire in my back. I can't do that. You feel me? You can't walk all the way around your house. You're really just paying rent to the city. It's just you're just on a premium level. It's like different tiers. Like if you rent, you're on this tier. But hey, if you go to the platinum tier, then But this is what I'm saying. This is what they don't want. They don't want other people to know about how to generate their own wealth.
Of why economic depressions occurred and why poverty.
And we all had this problem growing up. We all had the teacher that was good, the teacher that was helping, the teacher that understood us, the teacher that was teaching. We got the lesson that they was teaching, and we got other lessons on life. And always, that teacher has to go somewhere and leave us crying. But as I went back and I looked at the teachers, them teachers went to some good ass schools. They got paid more money. So half of that damn line, half of that crying stuff wasn't bad. Like a lot of them, when they be like, I'm out of here, I can't take this no more. Like they already got another job. And they be capping up the kids, making us all sad and shit like that. But they just find a reason to start leaving, and they got a whole nother job, and then you see where they at. But we be thinking like it'd be crazy. Sometimes it do be what we be thinking, but a lot of times these people got other agendas. Because like I said, I'm gonna say it later.
Persisted alongside industrial growth. The book sold 3 million copies in a decade. For context, that was approximately one copy for every 20 American adults alive at the time. It was the second best-selling book in the United States behind only the Bible for a period in the 1880s. It was taught in schools. It was debated in churches. It was the lens through which a generation of American teachers understood and explained economic life to their students. George's central argument was specific and falsifiable. He contended that the concentration of land ownership was the primary mechanism by which wealth extracted from productive labor accumulated in the hands of those who produced nothing. He documented the pattern across historical economies, named the mechanism with precision, and proposed a remedy so straightforward that it terrified the people it would have affected. A single tax on land value, not on labor, not on production, on the value of land itself, which increased not because of anything the landowner did, but because of the community growing around it. It was not a fringe position. Andrew Carnegie called Progress and Poverty one of the most important books ever written before he changed his mind about saying so publicly. Politicians built careers on it, teachers taught in as established economic history, because in 1880 it essentially was. This is the curriculum Edna Morse was still using in 1901. And this is why the letter she wrote to her county superintendent is worth reading carefully. She had received, as had school teachers across Kansas, Ohio, Indiana, and a dozen other states, a new curriculum framework that year. The frameworks arrived through state education boards, which had begun receiving substantial organizational support from a network of philanthropic foundations that had not existed a decade earlier. The framing was always the same: modernization, efficiency, preparing students for the industrial economy. The new curriculum frameworks were thorough and well produced. They specified content with a precision that earlier frameworks had not. And what they specified with equal precision was what should no longer be included.
Land announcement and the OCC. That's the thing. We don't think about land. We think about a house. We want to buy a house. We want to have it built. Nobody thinks about, and that's why they took the trades out. Building your own house. Back in the day, Walmart, or I don't know if it was Walmart, but what was the name? Sears. You can buy a house and they'll bring a truck and drop off all of the supplies that you need to build your house. And then you will build your house. And see, and the people that will help you build your house will fucking want to help live in that house too. So, if you help me build this house and say that it got 7 rooms, I give you a room downstairs. You got me? All right, bet. I'm gonna go over here and do this. And then as they all start working together and doing shit, you know what I'm saying? Then you start making money out the house. All of those people, sometimes they could be called slaves. Sometimes, sometimes they're employees. But sometimes it's just people coming together to do a thing. Like, even now, a lot of what people will do is it'll be 10 people. And those 10 people will all can build the house. And so on a day off from building other people's houses, they will come together to build the first man house. Then once that house is built, they'll all come together and build the second man house. Once that house is built, they'll come, and that's how it works. I know so many people that then build all of these damn houses and never built a house for themselves.
The economic history of monetary creation was gone. The documented history of deflationary policy in the 1870s and 1880s, which had transferred wealth from debtors to creditors on a scale that a generation of economists had called the greatest organized robbery in American history, was gone. Henry George's land value analysis was gone. The greenback movement, which had proposed that the federal government, rather than private banks, should control the issuance of currency, was not merely deprioritized. It was reclassified as a discredited fringe position, despite having elected governors, senators, and representatives across 14 states in the 1870s and 1880s. The Granger movement's documented record of railroad monopoly pricing against which prairie farmers had organized and which had produced the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887 was reduced to a footnote. The National Banking Act of 1863 and what it had done to rural credit availability was not taught at all. The chain of cause and effect connecting federal monetary decisions to farm foreclosure rates across the Great Plains, a chain that farmers themselves had understood well enough to build a national political movement around it, was replaced with a narrative about individual thrift and market efficiency that contained no mechanism and no names. What replaced it was not wrong exactly. It was simply incomplete in ways that benefited specific people. The new curriculum taught that markets allocated resources efficiently when left alone.
This is the one. This is to Mrs. Edna Morris. While discussion of history are necessary, focusing on divisive economic theories is deemed detrimental to the development of the patriotic sentiment and the civic unity among students. Basically, now what they're getting into is trying to say that to the people that don't have land over here, it'll make them feel bad that they don't have land and they don't have rights to this land. When, of course, they can get a business and own some land and become a part. And then they also saying, we don't want to remind the people who land that we are using and took to let them know that they can come back and take it or type time. So, let's not talk about that. Let's make it like we all the same because we all trying to get the same job. Not, I got 18 acres, you got one, I'm better than you. Therefore, you are hereby instructed to immediately cease instruction on these topics. Your curriculum must align strictly with the newly mandated guidelines emphasizing industrial progress, technological achievement, and the opportunities afforded by the modern American economy. Technology, whatever achievements is again, it's telling your child, don't worry about writing because you got AI. Just learn AI. Teach the kids AI because they can do everything with AI. Teach them the computers because they can do everything with that. Don't teach them how to write. No, they don't need to know the multiplication like that because they can just they don't need a calculator. They can just ask Google what it is. Teach them that. That's basically what this is right here. And as I'm saying that, y'all like, what? That's crazy. No, I'm still going to teach my kids this. I'm still going. Exactly. Now, is it wrong? No. AI is right. AI is doing stuff. But we got to teach them the basics. And what they know, for real, is that the AI came from the writing and knowing the math on your own. So once you go to the AI, you ain't going to be able to make your own damn AI. Whether you learn how to write and do the math on your own and code on your own, then you can just go and do the AI and be next to the AI instead of trying to get the job with it. But that's what they're saying, like trying to get people to go into these industries, into those factories, right? Especially the damn car industries, them damn factories and all of that. Ford and these cars, like I say, when the New World came over, it's not really Ford per se. He's just the image, right? It really was the whole New World Order was the cars. That was the whole point. Take away the railroads, put in the cars. Take away the people, because railroads is more people coming together, talking, being community. If you notice, they took away the porches. So when cars come in to play, families split up, neighborhoods split up, people that work together split up.
It taught that wages reflected the productive value of labor. It did not teach who decided what productive value meant, who set the conditions under which that determination was made, or what the documented historical record showed about what happened to wages when workers had no organized alternative. It taught the conclusion. It removed the
It said it didn't tell you that once you go to the job and you work for them, it's up to them to say how much they're going to pay you. That's what they just said. I don't really know how they said it, but that's what they just said. And that's true. So they say instead of you going and being your own business, go into their business. Even though in our business, we can decide to close down and now you don't got no job. We can fire you. We cannot give you as much money. And you have no choice but to deal with it because you have no choice, other options.
evidence that had led prior generations to question that conclusion. Edna Morse understood this precisely. In her letter, she writes, and I am paraphrasing because the original document is fragile and the county only permits
History of land ownership in America, treaties and pacts. They don't teach the treaties. And treaties and pacts mean because all we learn is me growing up, I'm gonna say. I don't know about you. All I learned was they was uncivilized. So even when it comes to the treaties, they didn't explain that, but it didn't make sense. It don't make sense that if they such savages, how could they make deals? And that's why I'm saying a lot of the people that was making the deals were like Drake and J. Cole. You feel me? Like, they moms is white, but their dad is black. So they can come into the black neighborhood, do what they want to do. And then, like Drake do, he come to America, do what he want to do, then take it back to Canada. You feel me? That's what they do. But they act like since their dad is from a certain part, that makes them a part of a certain part, but they never was there. His dad was from Chicago, so people came to Chicago. I'm gonna just say this. I don't know where Drake dad is from, but let's just say Drake dad is from Chicago. Me, his mom, they have a baby in Canada. But Drake dad is from here. So Drake know that Drake dad is from here. Drake look at all of the crazy stuff going on over there, and he like, I want to be a part. He come over here and say, and like, who you? Oh, I'm Drake. My dad is so-and-so. Oh, this is his dad. Okay, yeah. And let's say his dad owned the block. Now he like, listen, this is my block now. How is this your block? Because that was his dad. Oh, all right, well then, yep, that's his block. Over the brother that the dad made in Chicago with a black woman already. Now he beefing. But since he's coming from Canada and he got this money and different things like that, and he got all that influence and everything, people looking at him like he cooler, he just override. It's crazy. But anyway, treaties impacts. Basically what I'm saying is this stuff was, you can have this part and we'll have this part. And then people either got greedy or their cousins came down and was like especially with William Penn. William Penn was cool with the Lenapes and made the deal. And then his sons came and was like, look, man, we only got this square, but for real, and the Indians over there. But I got my homie that just came from Germany over here, and I don't want him in our square. We don't like really the way like they do stuff and stuff like that. So let's just let them go over there. I don't want them to mess up our little things. So let them go over there into Germantown, right? So then they built Germantown. But what was in Germantown first? The Lenape. That was the first place. That's why The natives had to keep picking up and going, until the point where like most of them just kept going all the way until they see a white man. Whenever they see a white man, they pack up and go again, because they know once one white man comes, it's gonna come a whole bunch more. The first one can lie and be like, "Oh, nice if you want," but no, once they come, then they keep spreading. So now, not saying like the native was just packing up and leaving. No, they was fighting back. They was doing stuff, and they was getting stuff done to them. As I remember on one joint, the natives was showed them how to get across, and as they got across, they started killing all of the animals on their way. The white man. Why? Because that's what the natives was using. So the natives is helping them get through all of these dangerous things and all that stuff. And at the same time, they knowing like these are their resources though. Let's kill all these resources. It's crazy. Native American claims and conflicts. They don't talk about the conflicts, right? If anything, they say that they were savages or that they got blown out. But they don't ever say how many times they got into it. You feel me?
Transcription that she had been teaching her students to read economic history the same way she taught them to read any history, with primary sources, with documented cause and effect, with the understanding that someone always benefits from a policy decision, and that identifying who benefits is the beginning of understanding why the decision was made. She writes that she did not believe it was her function as a teacher to protect her students from conclusions that made powerful people uncomfortable. She believed it was her function to teach them how to reach conclusions at all. The letter was written in October. She was dismissed in December. Now consider the scale of what was happening around her. It's in December. Now consider the scale of in October. She was.
For in your recent instruction of economic history, you have presented views and materials that conflict directly with established national interests and principles. This board considers such instruction unsuitable. By order of the superintendent, you are hereby directed to cease and desist from teaching any economic curriculum that departs from the official sanction history text immediately. A failure to comply will result in. All right, they hit it back with another joint. You feel me? Like they said, they sent her this, but she told them she don't care, and then they fired her ass in December.
Dismissed in December.
1990.
Now consider the scale of what was happening around her. In 1902, John Rockefeller established the General Education Board with an initial gift.
With Rent the Runway's limitless closet, you have the perfect look for every plan. Own your day. Rent the Runway.
Empower your students to be more authentic, impactful writers with Grammarly's comprehensive AI writing assistance. Use it
of $1 million, eventually totaling $53 million over the following 2 decades. The stated mission was to promote education in the United States without distinction of race, sex, or creed. The actual function, documented in the board's own published reports, was to coordinate and standardize American schooling along lines that its founders considered appropriate for an industrial economy. Frederick Gates, Rockefeller's philanthropic advisor, wrote in 1906 that the object was to produce in the child a perfect knowledge of what he ought to do and also a will to do it.
To the Board of Education and local authority, we, the undersigned parents of the students in Miss Edna Moore's class, do hereby earnestly petition for the reinstatement of the original curriculum. We plead with the authorities to allow school children to continue learning original economic history, a subject we believe is Board of Education vital for their understanding of the world and their future responsibilities. We respectfully request that Ms. Morris be. So Back then, people still was doing this. Look, 1910s, 1920s, 1920s.
He was describing the function of school. He was not describing the function that Edna Morse believed schools served. In 1905, Andrew Carnegie established the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching with $10 million. One of its first projects was a pension system for teachers. This is remembered as an act of generosity. What is less discussed is the condition attached. To qualify for the Carnegie pension, a college had to adopt specific curriculum standards that the foundation considered acceptable.
Again, the government, when the government is giving you money, it's to trick your ass. If you don't know the trick or you don't know how to sidestep it, you're going to get tricked. So this is the same thing that happened with the churches, y'all, right? Instead of the churches being like Father Divine and telling everybody to go out, make their own money, don't give me your tithes, but I will have a watermelon stand outside after this. You can do that. It was paying for the building, and that's that. Once the building funds is paid for, that's that. But now what they did was they gave them money, paid for the building, and told them, listen, all of the tithes you get is your money. All of this now is yours, or if you got to get this much, whatever you get, we'll match it. So that's why they out here yelling, let me, like, they don't ain't no damn building fund, nigga. This building already bought and paid for. Ain't no damn light bill. Your light's been paid for the next 5 years, all that. What we paying for? But what they do is they start giving people bread, and now, you know, you got to accept gay people now. You feel me? You got to accept, which I don't know, but to each his own. But to churches, they wasn't with that. But once money started going in, you started seeing things get said differently. And it wasn't on, I noticed, like, it wasn't on, like, people doing bad. It was more on men being bad, right? So it wasn't you, like before, if you was gay, you was the devil. But now it's like, no, if you gay, then, you know, you still God's child. And it's probably a man somewhere that made you that way.
Curriculum control dressed as retirement security. The teachers who taught the old economic history were aging out. The teachers who would replace them would be trained in institutions that had accepted Carnegie's terms to secure Carnegie's.
So this is what happened. The new teachers don't know what the fuck is going on. And now teachers is not even, like, teachers don't even happen. Like, I'll be a teacher. I'll be in these damn schools teaching. Like, you feel me? Before, it would be a person went to school for science. To become a science teacher, they had to do all these damn science classes and everything. Now, it don't matter what you got. You can be whatever teacher for whatever. Because the way that they teach isn't necessary to make people smart, so you don't have to be smart to teach it, if that makes sense. But this is what they're saying is they came up with the money to teach these people how to teach. So now once these new people are learning, they're not going to know what's right and what's wrong. They just going to think that they teach in the right way. Now the institutions knew what was up, but that's next year's problem. Early American history, tariffs. I just found out what a tariff was. I never knew what the fuck a tariff was.
Money. This was not a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. There were no secret meetings, no coded communications, no explicit agreement to suppress the truth. It was something more durable than a conspiracy. It was convergent interest. The men who funded the standardization of American education were the same men whose accumulated wealth the old economic curriculum explained, documented, and questioned. They did not need to coordinate. They needed only to fund. Go back to Kansas, back to Osage County in the winter of 1901. Edna Morse knew her students. She had watched them grow up in farming communities where deflationary currency policy had foreclosed their parents' land in the 1880s and 1890s, transferring it to Eastern creditors at fractions of its productive value. She had watched families lose in 2 years what had taken a generation to build, And she understood from the economic history she had been teaching why that had happened and who had designed the conditions that made it happen. And she understood that if her students never learned that history, they would have no framework for recognizing it when it happened again. They would have only the story that markets were natural, that outcomes were deserved, and that poverty persisted because of failures of individual character, rather than structural decisions made by people with names.
Yes, markets are natural. What? Why? No, let me tell you, a market, it's not natural. You should have all that shit. All that shit. The market should come from foreigners.
And addresses and specific financial interests.
Lesson plan. The impact of economic policy changes. To teach students who benefits and who loses when economic policies shift, essentially to examine the distribution of wealth and opportunity resulting from government actions. This is from 1913, her old class, right? Discuss recent terrorists, analyzing impact. Boy, this old lady shit.
Hello? Hey, Rebecca, this is John calling.
That is what she refused to stop saying. Not a theory, not an ideology. A documented pattern with named beneficiaries, available in historical records, traceable through congressional testimony and court filings, and the archive.
Yo, this Edna Morris is giving a new meaning to Morris code.
Correspondence of the men who made the decisions. She was not teaching radicalism. She was teaching the evidentiary standards she applied to everything else. Her students remembered her. That is the part of that stays with me. 3 of them wrote letters later in their lives, 2 of which have been located in county historical collections in Kansas, and they describe their teacher in nearly identical terms. They describe a woman who treated economic questions the same way she treated geological questions or biological questions, as things that had answers, and that the answers could be found if you knew where to look and what to look for. One of them writes that she was the only teacher he ever had who made him feel that the world could be understood, not simplified, not explained away, understood. He writes that after she left, the new teacher was perfectly kind and perfectly useless in that specific way.
Map used by Miss Edna Morris for 8th grade social studies lesson on Kansas land. Yeah, they definitely don't want that. So owner farming, tenant farming, owner operated farms.
The students who sat in Edna Morse's classroom in 1901 were born around 1888. They would have been in their early 20s during the Panic of 1907, when J.P. Morgan essentially performed the function of a central bank by coordinating private capital to stop a financial collapse. They would have been in their 30s when the Federal Reserve Act passed in 1913. The legislative resolution of the monetary debate that their teacher had been forbidden to include in her curriculum. They would have watched, with whatever framework they retained from those last years of the old curriculum, the same mechanisms their teacher had documented play out at national scale. Whether they recognized what they were seeing depended entirely on whether Edna Morse had gotten to them before December of 1901. The General Education Board published a document in 1913 titled The Country School of Tomorrow. In it, Frederick Gates writes with striking frankness that the aim of education is not to create independent thinkers, but to produce useful citizens who will perform the tasks society assigns them without friction. He did not use those exact words, but the document is publicly available and the meaning is not subtle. The goal was a population literate enough to follow instructions and not literate enough to question the instructions' origins. The old economic curriculum was incompatible with that goal because it taught origins. It taught that instructions had authors with interests, and that the interests could be named. There is a question I keep returning to. How many Edna Morses were there? How many school teachers in 1901 and 1902 and 1903 received those new curriculum frameworks and looked at what had been removed and understood immediately what the removal meant? How many of them wrote letters to their superintendents? And how many of those letters were preserved? And how many of those that were preserved have been read by anyone in the last 50 years? The Kansas State Historical Society has 1.4 million documents in its collection. They have been digitizing since 2003. Edna Morse's letter became searchable in 2019. Before that, it was in a folder labeled Educator Correspondence, Osage County, 1890 to 1910, a folder that has been in the archive since 1948. 70 years in a folder. And if there is one Edna Morse in Kansas, there are 50 more in Ohio and Indiana and Nebraska and Iowa. Teachers who saw the curriculum change and understood what the change meant and wrote it down, because that is what teachers do. They write things down, and whose letters are sitting in state historical societies and county courthouse basements and university special collections waiting for someone to look in the right folder. The economic history that was removed in 1901 did not disappear entirely. It survived in the letters of teachers who refused to accept the new frameworks without protest. It survived in the memories of students who remembered being taught to ask who benefits before accepting any explanation of how the world worked. And it survived in the documented record of what happened to the American economy in the decades that followed, a record that makes considerably more sense when you know what the curriculum that preceded it contained. The archive is open, the documents are there. And somewhere in a folder that nobody has thought to check since 1948, a teacher is still trying to finish the lesson she was told to stop giving. The last school teacher who taught the original history did not lose because she was wrong. She lost because what she was right about was inconvenient to people who had recently acquired the institutional capacity to determine what American children would and would not be taught. That capacity has not diminished. What has diminished?
My neighbor hasn't been to a gas station in 4 months. I thought he was lying until he lent me his truck. A small device plugged into a truck cigarette lighter. 300 miles driven in 1 week, and the fuel gauge barely moved.
The Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts.
What I've been telling y'all. So it's saying Boston is a city built on top of a city, right? What have I been telling you? That none of this shit is new. The new world, they call it a new world for a reason. Because there was an old world. And we thought, what did we think the old world looked like? Cavemen, Indians, Rome. But was there electricity? Remember I said, they said the caveman invented fire and then the wheel. And I said, they set fire and burned down a lot of the old world stuff. So they used fire to cleanse. So that's why fire is the main staple. I hate how they just use fire for everything, to burn shit up. And the wheel, because cars took over. See, that's why, that was the other thing. Streets could be a lot tinier. Like, before we had streets that was a lot tinier, you could jump across to the other side of the street and say what's up. People came outside all the time. There was a lot more porches and things like that. People talking and stuff. And that's what they don't really want. They only want you talking when you go to work or when you go to church. And then you go home, you talk to your family, something. But for real, they want you just sitting down watching TV.
The Carnegies, the Morgans, names that built America's industrial empire, dynasties that shaped modern capitalism, families so wealthy they literally funded wars, built cities, and controlled entire industries. But here's what they don't teach you in history class. Every single one of these families had zero recorded wealth before the 1850s. Not some wealth, not modest wealth, zero. John D. Rockefeller's father was a con artist who sold fake cancer cures and abandoned his family for months at a time. Cornelius Vanderbilt started with a $100 loan to buy a sailboat. Andrew Carnegie arrived in America with his family owning exactly one trunk of belongings. J.P. Morgan's grandfather was a tavern keeper in Connecticut. And it's not just these four. Every major American dynasty that exists today follows the exact same pattern. Massive generational wealth that appeared out of nowhere in a 30-year window. And the explanation you've been given about hard work, innovation, and the American dream, that's not the full story, not even close. Let's investigate what really...
Let me say this. How about this? Right? When somebody in England told William Penn to come to Philly and he can have that land. And when he got here, it was Indians here. But he had all these money from over there and different things. So teach them what money is and everything. So yeah, they find people and they appoint people. Now what this is sounding like too is that especially one of the Rockefeller boy, he ain't shit. Sorry, Rock. And that's why they don't care about us. Because they don't care about them goddamn selves.
happened between 1850 and 1880 that created the wealthiest families in human history. Before we dive into the real story, you need to understand just how complete this pattern is. The Astors, the Carnegies, the Mellons, the Morgans, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Guggenheims, the DuPonts, the Harrimans, the Huntingtons. These aren't just rich families. These are the families that own America. The families that built the railroads, controlled the oil, dominated steel production, ran the banks, and shaped government policy for over a century. And here's the thing that nobody talks about. If you go back to 1840 and try to find any of these names in wealth records, tax documents, or property holdings, you won't find them. Not because the records were lost, because they didn't exist. The Vanderbilt fortune started in 1810 when Cornelius Vanderbilt was 16 years old. His mother loaned him $100 to buy a small sailboat to ferry passengers between Staten Island and Manhattan. That's it, $100 and a sailboat. By 1877, when he died, he was worth over $100 million. That's the equivalent of over $200 billion in today's money. From a $100 loan to the richest man in America in 67 years. But the Vanderbilt story isn't unique. It's the template. Every single dynasty follows the exact same arc, poverty or modest means, before 1850. Explosive, almost incomprehensible wealth by 1880. And that timeline isn't a coincidence. So what happened in those 30 years? The official story is industrialization. The rise of railroads, steel, oil, and banking created opportunities that didn't exist before. Smart men with vision seized those opportunities and built empires. Hard work, innovation, risk-taking, the American dream in action. And that's partially true, but it's not the full picture because industrialization happened in England too. It happened in France. It happened in Germany. But those countries didn't create.
And so that can be kind of like today, like let's say like somebody like the AI stuff popping off or Bitcoin, right? So yeah, when Bitcoin started though, it was cheaper. It was cheap, you could buy it and things like that. But people that really benefited off of it, people that already had some money. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the businesses and stuff like that really came from people having parents giving them money and then they can go and do stuff with. But the people that parents couldn't give them money, they had to like do it on their own. They're the ones they're trying to say, oh, you're not good enough. But they know damn well that the wealth that people build from nothing is way more important than the wealth that you build from somebody giving you $100. You feel me? But I will say this though, whichever one that one was Carnegie, back and forth on that boat, that's how you make your bread. That makes sense. I could see a person working that job, being a young man working that job, becoming rich as shit because that's where people coming in and going. They whoever is going across that water got a story to tell. They're going across the water for a reason. They either running from something or running to something or just running back and forth. You feel me? And just knowing that will open him up to be like, wait, I can make money this way and things like that. So I can see that one. But
dozens of families with Vanderbilt level wealth in a single generation. England had old money, aristocratic families that had been wealthy for centuries. France had the same. Germany had the same. America was different. In America, the wealth didn't transfer from old aristocrats to new industrialists. Because there were no old aristocrats, the wealth appeared out of thin air. And the mechanism that made that possible wasn't just hard work and innovation. It was something far more deliberate. Let's start with the railroads, because that's where the real story begins. In 1850, America had about 9,000 miles of railroad track. By 1880, that number exploded to over 93,000 miles, the largest infrastructure project in human history up to that point, and every single mile of that track was built with government land grants, government subsidies, and government-backed bonds.
What do dentists know about teeth whitening that you don't? You heard that right. Yellow teeth need to be extremely careful about having social anxiety.
The Pacific Railway Acts of 1862 and 1864 handed railroad companies like the Union Pacific and Central Pacific over 170 million acres of public land for free. That's an area larger than Texas. The government also gave them loans worth tens of millions of dollars at below market interest rates. Cornelius Vanderbilt didn't just build railroads with his own money and compete in a free market. He bought politicians, he bribed legislators, he manipulated stock prices, he controlled shipping rates through backroom deals with government officials. His wealth wasn't created by innovation, it was extracted through monopoly power guaranteed by the state. And the Vanderbilts weren't alone. Leland Stanford, one of the big four who built the Central Pacific Railroad, was simultaneously the governor of California while his company received massive federal land grants. That's not a conflict of interest. That's open corruption. He literally wrote the laws that funded his own railroad. And when workers protested unsafe conditions or demanded fair wages, he used state militia to crush strikes. The official story of the railroad barons is that they connected America and built the infrastructure that made the country a superpower. And that's true, but they did it by extracting wealth from the government, exploiting immigrant labor, and using political power to eliminate competition. The free market had nothing to do with it. Now let's talk about oil, because the Rockefeller story is even more revealing. John D. Rockefeller founded Standard Oil in 1870. Within 10 years, he controlled 90% of America's oil refining capacity. 90%. That's not innovation. That's monopoly. And the way he built that monopoly wasn't through better products or lower prices. It was through a strategy called railroad rebates. Here's how it worked. Rockefeller made secret deals with railroad companies. He would ship massive quantities of oil on their trains, and in exchange, they would give him rebates. Not just discounts on his own shipments, but rebates on his competitors' shipments too. So every time a rival oil company shipped a barrel of oil, Rockefeller got paid. His competitors were literally funding his empire without knowing it. This wasn't legal. It violated common carrier laws. But Rockefeller had enough political power that his competitors were literally competents, and in exchange, they would give him rebates. That's how it worked. Rockefeller made secret deals with railroad companies. He would ship massive quantities of oil on their trains, and in exchange, they would give him rebates. Not just discounts on his own shipments, but rebates on his competitors' shipments too. Rebates. Massive quantities of oil on their trains, and in exchange, they would give him rebates. Not just discounts on his own.
So wait, what the fuck? I don't get it. So he would use their trains to ship. First of all, them damn train companies, y'all dumb as shit. Y'all shouldn't have been doing nothing with that damn gas, because that's why the cars help came in. But anyway, so he would give them the oil. So I guess by them getting that, they got to use as much oil as they wanted. Plus, because he was doing that, with the rebate, what the fuck does that mean? What's the rebate again? That's when you buy something and then you get the money back? I'm gonna have to ask Google to explain that shit. But they explain it.
Own shipments, but rebates on his competitors' shipments too. So every time a rival oil company shipped a barrel of oil, Rockefeller got paid. His competitors were literally funding his empire without knowing it. This wasn't legal.
Could it be because, okay, if he shipped his oil up there and they using the oil, maybe they used, I don't know, I don't want to get into that, but basically, like, let's say, like, if I pay the gas for the Scepter or for this truck company, and this truck company also, whatever they do Pepsi too, and I'm Coca-Cola, but I'm Coca-Cola and I paid for all of their gas. So now, even when they get a Pepsi truck, they pay me because I'm the one that got the gas. They gave them the gas to go. I think that's kind of what's happening. Like, because they are the ones in the back, like, yo, we got your back.
Violated common carrier laws. But Rockefeller had enough political power that the laws weren't enforced. And when some states tried to crack down, he simply restructured Standard Oil as a trust, creating a legal loophole that allowed him to operate across state lines without oversight. By 1880, Rockefeller was worth hundreds of millions, and he didn't get there by drilling more oil or refining it better. He got there by manipulating the system, crushing competition, and using political connections to avoid regulation. The invisible hand of the free market didn't create his wealth. The very visible hand of government did. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because the same families that built wealth through railroads and oil also controlled the banks. And the banks controlled everything else. J.P. Morgan didn't start as a banker. His grandfather owned a tavern. His father became a merchant banker in London, but the family wasn't wealthy by aristocratic standards.
One tiny flaw ruins most grounding shoes, but grounded footwear fixed it. You see, most grounding shoes use a single copper ring that...
In the sense that
JP,
these people are the ones that they built up to it, because it's like the idea was already made and he couldn't do it himself. So his son, when you grow up, your pop was a banker. He's gonna teach you every damn thing about banking, and you're gonna be trying to help him out. So he done figured out a good way to do it. Plus, working in a tavern, again, that's another place where people come and they're gonna be talking. So that's a place to where, so you get on somebody's good side and they like you, and they like, yeah, we can use him. Oh wait, his dad was this too? All right, yeah.
Morgan's real fortune came from a single deal in 1879 when he helped the US government sell bonds to refinance Civil War debt. He made millions in fees, and once he had that capital, he started buying up railroads, steel companies, and industrial firms. By 1900, J.P. Morgan controlled US Steel, General Electric, and half a dozen major railroads. He was so powerful that when the US government faced a financial crisis in 1907, they asked Morgan to bail them out. Think about that. The government went to a private banker and asked him to save the economy. And he did, because he had more liquid capital than the Treasury. Morgan didn't create value. He consolidated power. He bought struggling companies, merged them into monopolies, and then used those monopolies to extract wealth from everyone else. And the government not only allowed it, they encouraged it, because Morgan's banks were the only institutions big enough to stabilize the financial system. This is the real story of how American dynasties were built. Not through innovation, through consolidation of power backed by government policy. And the pattern repeats across every major industry. Andrew Carnegie built his steel empire using the same playbook. He undercut competitors by manipulating freight rates through deals with railroads. He crushed labor unions with the help of state militias. And when he sold Carnegie Steel,
he crushed labor unions with the help of state militias. So that just means that when they had the union popping, they sent the National Guard in to stop the union. Which, don't they do that shit now? I mean, that's what a state militia is to me. I mean, unless it's a security firm or something like that. But basically, that's what it is. National Guard niggas. Send them out there for the union workers to say that we getting treated bad. And the government is like, huh? They saying that you ain't treating them right. They did what? Oh, no. All right, yeah, we're going to send down some troops.
To JP Morgan in 1901 for $480 million, he became the richest man in the world overnight.
Monopoly is a history. It's a history game. It's about history. It's to teach you this, what they don't teach in the schools. Land, how to get it, how this person, if they own it, every time you walk by, you got to pay them. How your ass can go to jail for not paying, for just walking in the wrong place. And you ain't even do nothing wrong. Just living your life. Because ain't that crazy? Like when they say go to jail, it don't be like you murder somebody, you rob somebody, you go to jail. No, it'd be like you landed on this, you got to go to jail. You didn't pay, you got to go to jail. That's all jail was. Remember debt jail? Robert Morris, or was it Robert Morris, I believe? He's the one that got rid of the debt jail. Before, instead of the companies calling you like, yo, you owe this much money, they'll find your ass and throw you in jail. And you gonna have to call your people, yo, bring some bread. You know what I'm saying? I need to get the fuck up out of here.
Right. But Carnegie didn't invent steel. He didn't even improve the manufacturing process in any revolutionary way. What he did was control the supply chain, eliminate competition, and use political power to maintain his monopoly. The Bessemer process that made cheap steel possible was invented in England. Carnegie just applied it in America, where labor was cheaper and government regulation was weaker. So why did this only happen in America? Why didn't England or France or Germany create dozens of Rockefeller-level fortunes in the same time period? Because those countries had existing power structures. Aristocratic families, established monopolies, strong labor movements. In England, if you wanted to build a railroad, you had to negotiate with landowners who had legal titles going back centuries. In America, the government just seized the land from Native Americans and handed it to railroad companies for free.
And then they did the same thing with the highways. They took the land and then gave it to them. And what do you think these natives was doing at the time? So they was jumping out of bushes, they was fighting back. Yeah. And this is also why they stopped teaching in schools about land, because people are like, oh, we at the train station. And they don't want nobody to be like, well, you know, the train station used to be the Susquehannas and the Lenapes and the Cherokees and all that. They don't want you to talk about that. They just want you to be like, hey, you know what? You could become a train person too. You can become a train engineer. How about that? I don't know. Say one day you can own your own train company. I don't know.
European countries also had stronger regulations, banking laws, labor protections, antitrust frameworks. America had none of that until the early 1900s. The Gilded Age was called the Gilded Age for a reason. It looked like gold, but underneath it was corruption, exploitation, and wealth extraction on a scale the world had never seen. And the families that built that wealth didn't just get rich. They built dynasties that still control massive portions of the American economy today. The Rockefeller family still manages billions through trusts and foundations. The Morgans evolved into JP Morgan Chase, one of the largest banks in the world. The Vanderbilt fortune diluted over generations, but the name still carries weight in business and politics. These weren't self-made men who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They were opportunists who exploited a moment in history when the government was handing out land, subsidies, and monopoly power to anyone willing to take it. And once they had that power, they used it to rewrite the rules in their favor. The myths we tell about these families, the rags to riches stories, the celebration of their philanthropy, all of it obscures the real mechanism of wealth creation. Andrew Carnegie built libraries with his fortune. But he built that fortune by paying steelworkers starvation wages and using Pinkerton agents to shoot strikers. John D. Rockefeller donated millions to universities and medical research. But he made those millions by destroying competitors and manipulating markets. This isn't to say these men weren't.
And again, that millions in research and all of that medical stuff was people that they was doing that shit on. You know how now they like don't test on animals? Yeah, they was testing on niggas. Natives. People that they said was crazy. People that got sexually assaulted and abused. And they had to get discarded because they talked too damn much.
Smart, they were. This isn't to say they didn't work hard, they did. But intelligence and hard work don't create $100 billion fortunes. Systems do.
My wife stopped trusting me because I never do the things I say I'll do. She just does everything herself now. I finally found out why.
The kitchen light has been out for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And the system...
They come from people like her and her students. See, when they started doing all of this resetting and stuff like that, people knew, people were still around, people had feelings. Those were the people that they put in this. Why you think it was so many crazy people and all that shit? That was a lot of that. It was a lot of those people that knew what the old world, that knew what like technology and shit was. You feel me? Like a Tesla type of ball. You feel me? Which that's crazy in its own. That's another psyop. But Tesla either is a Tartarian or a barbarian.
In America between 1850 and 1880 was designed to transfer public wealth into private hands at a speed and scale that had never happened before. The land grants alone transferred over 200 million acres of public land to private railroad companies. That's 10% of the entire United States, given away for free to corporations run by a handful of families. Imagine if the government did that today. Imagine if they gave Jeff Bezos 10% of America and said, build some infrastructure, people would riot. But in the 1800s, that's exactly what happened. And we celebrate the men who took the land as visionaries. The question isn't whether these families were smart or hardworking. The question is why the government created a system that allowed them to accumulate so much wealth so quickly. And the answer is that the government didn't have a choice. America was expanding. The country needed railroads, steel, oil, and banks. And there was no existing infrastructure to build those industries. So the government partnered with private capital and handed over control. But once those families had control, they never gave it back.
Mm-hmm.
They used their wealth to buy politicians, fund campaigns, and write laws that protected their monopolies.
I mean, it was basically supposed to be like, yo, we building this together, right? So yes, we're the government, but I'm like, y'all ain't making money, right? So help us out so we over here, we got this happening, over there, we got that happening. Like, yeah, we'll help you. And from then it was on. Because they had the money. They had the, you know what I mean? Nobody was going to go against theirs. Damn.
By the time the government tried to regulate them with antitrust laws in the early 1900s, it was too late. The dynasties were already entrenched. And here's the part that almost nobody talks about. The same families that built wealth through railroads, oil, and steel also controlled the media. William Randolph Hearst built a newspaper empire. Joseph Pulitzer did the same. Yet these men didn't just report the news. They shaped public opinion. They decided which stories got told and which stories got buried. So when you read about the Gilded Age in history books, you're reading a narrative that was crafted by the same people who benefited from the system. The rags to riches myth, the celebration of industrial progress, the idea that monopolies were necessary for economic growth, all of that was propaganda designed to justify wealth extraction. And it worked. For over a century, Americans have celebrated these families as examples of what's possible in a free market. But there was no free market. There was a government-backed oligopoly that transferred public resources into private hands and called it capitalism. The revisionist economic history isn't a conspiracy theory. It's what happens when you actually look at the data, when you trace where the wealth came from, when you ask why every major American dynasty emerged in the same 30-year window, when you stop accepting the mythology and start examining the mechanisms. Because the truth is, that generational wealth in America wasn't created by the invisible hand of the market. It was created by the very visible hand of government policy. And the families that benefited from that policy have spent the last 150 years rewriting history to make it look like they earned it. The Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Carnegies, the Morgans, they didn't build America. They extracted America. And the dynasties they created still shape the economy, the government, and the distribution of wealth today. That's the story they don't teach in history class.
Listen, they gonna tell your ass that generational wealth is buying a house, owning a house.
That's the story that explains why every family that controls America today had no recorded wealth before the 1850s. Because the system that created that wealth didn't exist before the 1850s.
You becoming a doctor is going to create generational wealth. Going to school creates generational debt. The kid, what are you talking about?
And once it did exist, a handful of families seized control and never.
Because listen, you don't even got the money to give. The whole thing is you're supposed to be able to give your kids some bread. You feel me? So then that way the kid can go off on his life. But your ass ain't never gonna have the bread to give his ass. You better make sure that you fucking stocks and insurance on his ass. Because if not, you're gonna be owing for the rest of your life. You feel me? It's people
let go. The question isn't whether they were smart enough to take advantage of the opportunity. The question is whether we're smart enough to recognize that the opportunity shouldn't have existed in the first place. But let's go deeper. Because the railroad land grants and oil monopolies are just the surface. The real wealth extraction happened through something far more sophisticated.
Your last chance to disappear until summer and come back unrecognizable. Start the chair Tai Chi flow for
something that's still happening today. The manipulation of currency and credit. Before the Civil War, America didn't have a unified currency. Banks printed their own money. There were thousands of different types of banknotes circulating, and their value fluctuated wildly depending on the bank's reputation. This created chaos for commerce, but it also created opportunity for anyone who understood how to manipulate currency markets. The National Banking Acts of 1863 and 1864 changed everything. They created a unified national currency backed by government bonds, and here's the critical detail. The only way to get that currency was to buy government bonds first. So if you had capital, you could buy bonds, deposit them with the Treasury, and receive national banknotes worth 90%. To get that currency was to buy government. 1864 changed everything. They created a unified national currency backed by government bonds, and here's the critical detail. The only way to get that currency was to buy government bonds first. So if you had capital, you could buy bonds, deposit them with the Treasury, and receive national banknotes worth 90% of the bond value. Ma'am, you were literally printing money backed by government debt. J.P. Morgan's father, Junius Spencer Morgan, was one of the first to understand this system. He bought massive quantities of Union bonds during the Civil War when they were trading at steep discounts because people thought the North might lose. Then when the North won, those bonds skyrocketed in value. Junius Morgan made millions, and his son, J.P. Morgan, used that capital to become the most powerful banker in America.
So America needed money for the war. America said, yo, loan us some money. And every time you loan us money, we're going to give you a bond. And then you're going to be able to take that bond and get money for it. Once this war shit is over with, we going to have some bread for you. We're going to pay back y'all niggas with these bonds. So the people that had the bread at the time bought the bonds up. You feel me? What else they gonna spend their money on?
This wasn't investing. This was front-running government policy with insider knowledge. And the families who understood the bond market early got rich beyond measure while everyone else scrambled to figure out what was happening. The Morgans weren't the only ones. E.J. Cook built a banking empire by selling Union bonds to European investors during the Civil War. He made so much money that he personally financed the construction of the Northern Pacific Railway after the war. But when that railroad project collapsed in 1873, it triggered the Panic of 1873, one of the worst economic depressions in American history. Cook's Bank failed. Thousands of businesses went bankrupt. Unemployment hit 14%. But here's the thing. The families with real power didn't lose money in the Panic of 1873. They made money because economic crises are when assets get sold at fire sale prices. J.P. Morgan bought up railroads and industrial companies for pennies on the dollar. The Rockefellers expanded Standard Oil by acquiring bankrupt refineries. When Andrew Carnegie bought struggling steel mills and consolidated them into his empire. This is the pattern that repeats throughout American economic.
Oh, that's what they always tell you. When it's a depression, start buying stuff.
History. Create a boom through government subsidies and easy credit. Let smaller players overextend themselves. Trigger a crash. Buy everything at a discount. Consolidate power. Repeat. And the families that understand this pattern don't just survive the crashes, they thrive because they have enough capital to wait out the chaos and enough political connections to shape the recovery in their favor. Let's talk about the DuPont family, because their story reveals another mechanism of wealth creation that nobody talks about: government contracts. Eleuthère Irénée Dupont arrived in America from France in 1800 with almost nothing. He started a gunpowder mill in Delaware in 1802. For the first 40 years, the business was modest. But then came the Civil War, and suddenly the Union Army needed gunpowder. Lots of it. DuPont became the primary supplier. The company made millions. After the war, DuPont diversified into chemicals, explosives, and eventually synthetic materials like nylon. But the core of their wealth came from military contracts. World War I, World War II, the Cold War. Every major American conflict made the DuPont family richer. And they didn't just wait for contracts to come to them. They lobbied for military spending. They funded politicians who supported defense budgets. They shaped foreign policy to create demand for their products. This is the military-industrial complex before Eisenhower ever warned about it. And the DuPonts weren't alone. The Guggenheims made their fortune in mining and smelting, but they expanded through military contracts. The Mellons built Gulf Oil and Alcoa, both of which became essential to military operations. These families didn't just benefit from American wars, they had a financial incentive to make sure wars kept happening. And here's the part that's almost too dark to fully process. The same families that profited from American wars also did business with America's enemies. During World War II, companies like Standard Oil and Chase Bank had financial relationships with Nazi Germany. They didn't care about ideology, they cared about profit. And when the war ended, they faced almost no consequences because they were too powerful to prosecute. Let's go back to the timeline. Because the 30-year window between 1850 and 1880 wasn't random. It was the exact moment when three massive forces converged. The California gold rush brought an influx of capital. The Civil War created government demand for everything from railroads to weapons to bonds. And the westward expansion gave the government an excuse to seize land and hand it over to corporations. The gold rush alone transferred over $550 million worth of gold into the American economy between 1848 and 1855.
Now, that's what it was. It was that gold rush. That gold rush is when they was killing off the natives and shit. Because they would come at one place and they would have to go all the way to like all west, right? So I don't got it, man.
That's tens of billions in today's money. And where did that gold end up? In the banks controlled by families like the Morgans and the Mellons. Gold became the backing for currency. Currency became the tool for expansion. And expansion became the justification for monopoly.
So they just saying like what?
California went from a sleepy territory with less than 15,000 non-native settlers to a state with over 300,000 people in just 5 years. That kind of...
Think about that. You got 3,000 people in your neighborhood where you used to live at. Shout out to the natives that used to live there. then he wasn't getting treated right. The ones that was there, then the ones that was there. Let me tell you, some of them was nice and turned coat and took the deals with some of these people. And then at the end, they still got kicked out. Like, they would make a deal in the beginning, like, okay, yeah, you can take the left side, we got the right side. All right. And then after a while, they'll start getting pushed out of their side. They're like, yo, come on, what's going on? Like, we thought that we was cool with y'all. No, fuck no, y'all not by. Got them kicked out. And then when they go with the other natives, they get killed. Because the other natives was fighting. Y'all just stopped fighting and just gave up. And when they leave, the Indians don't leave. They never left. Somebody that looked like them, that they was training, that was the closest to them, that know what's going on, they start doing it. That's why I always say Little Red Riding Hood is Native Americans. Fucking looking like the Indians, all of that shit, looking like somebody to walk around like that's what that was. Sometimes the natives had to put on the clothes to look like them to get in and do what they had to do. A lot of times they was acting like they was natives. You feel me? So that's that Little Red Riding Hood, y'all. Belly showed y'all that too. Belly showed a lot of stuff. That was one thing that Belly showed when they was it Belly? Yeah, it was Belly. Or was it Shadows? Yeah, Belly. He was walking and the other was a old man or an old lady or a bum. And then he took off and started shooting people. The Trojan horse.
Of explosive growth required infrastructure, railroads, ports, banks, and the families who controlled that infrastructure didn't just get rich, they controlled the flow of capital across the entire western United States. Leland Stanford, the railroad baron, became governor of California in 1861. He used that position to grant his own railroad company monopoly rights over shipping routes. When competitors tried to challenge him, he changed the laws. When workers demanded better pay, he brought in Chinese immigrant labor at a fraction of the cost and played racial groups against each other to...
They're still doing this today. They took our jobs, right? I think it's so crazy. You got the white people coming over here talking about natives took their jobs and the slaves took their jobs when they stopped being slaves, and they pinned the broke white people against black people, and then now they got, they'll bring in all these different immigrants to go against other immigrants. Like, once you think that you the top, so like the last one happened with Spanish, like Cubans and stuff like that. Like, they was the closest ones, they was making it. But they started asking for too much shit. They started acting like they really was it. So they had to crush them and bring in some more people to take over what the fuck they got going on. And they seen it like, oh, wow, yeah. So they will definitely bring in some more people to do your job for cheaper, because at the end of the day, it's better over here. And they don't, like, the longer you are over here, the more you need, the more you want, and the harder it is to get it. There's some people that come right over here, they can get a BMW within 3 years. But for me to get a BMW within 3 years, you know how much other shit I gotta fucking not worry about? But if you just over here and your only damn thing to worry about getting is a BMW, then yeah, you're gonna get that. I ain't gonna be able to get no damn BMW that quick. I gotta worry about people from middle school, high school. I got other cars that I want that I probably end up getting before, that I probably have more money. I'll probably have enough money to get before I can get the BMW that I like, that I realize, damn, I might as well, you know what I mean? So the longer that you are over here, the more entitled you are. So then they'll just bring somebody else new and they're not that entitled. So that's why, worker laws is different. Like, yeah, like, if I'm telling you to come over to America and I put you in a project building You go to work all day and come back. Like, you chilling, you good. You in America, you get to watch TV, you get to go to the store, go to games and shit like that. You think that's all America is. But when you live in America, then you know, like, it's a lot of other stuff that goes with it. You know what I'm saying? So, I just want to say that.
Prevent unionization. This wasn't capitalism. This was feudalism dressed up in the language of free enterprise. The railroad barons were robber barons in the most literal sense. They robbed public resources, exploited immigrant labor, and crushed anyone who challenged their power. And the wealth they extracted wasn't just money. It was political power that has lasted for generations. The Rockefellers still fund think tanks and universities. The Mellons still control foundations that shape public policy. The DuPonts still own massive landholdings in Delaware. These families didn't just get rich, they built systems of power that outlasted them. Now let's talk about the Astors, because their story shows yet another mechanism of wealth creation, real estate speculation backed by insider knowledge. John Jacob Astor arrived in America from Germany in 1784 with nothing. But he started as a fur trader. But the real money came from real estate. Astor bought up land in Manhattan when it was still farmland and forest. How did he know where to buy? Because he had access to government officials who told him where the city was planning to expand. When New York built the Erie Canal in 1825, land values exploded along the route. Astor owned most of that land. He made millions overnight.
What land, bro? The fucking native land, bro. That's wild. What the fuck? People was already there. He done bought some land. So I'm gonna tell you how he brought the land. The government either did one or two things with the natives in that area. They either slaughtered them, which I think in that area, I think they was all slaughtered. Or they just made a treaty with them. And these treaties probably said, okay, you can have this land for 20 years, 100 years, or some shit like that. That's why in like Louisiana and things like that, that's why they don't teach you the treaties. You feel me? Like back then, they could teach you the treaties because it lets you see that America won. America was winning, and America, you know what I'm saying, was actually certified. You feel me? But the treaty's like 100 years, 200 years, and shit like that. But now, once it get down like 50 years or something like that, they're like, whoa, we can't be teaching about these treaties. We don't want them to be remembering that. Cause then the government gonna have to renegotiate with the people. With the people who land that really is, they're gonna have to renegotiate with them and either keep the land and give them some money or give them back the land and have to walk away. That's why Louisiana is so. That's why they was flooding the shit out of them, trying to get rid of the real ones. New Orleans and Philadelphia is the most black people. They try to get you with Atlanta and shit. The real indigenous Jones, Louisiana and Philadelphia. If you was black, that's where you could go at and be and start some shit, get your stuff together. So the difference between Louisiana and Philadelphia is a lot of the Philadelphians isn't the real Lenapes and Susquehannas. They was already gone by the time that happened, for the most part. However, in Louisiana, a lot of them was still around. So Philly was kind of black and white at the same time. They was all black. So anyway, it said Astor owned most of that land. He made millions overnight. Right. So, but they don't tell you that. They tell you that he made money and he bought land. Not how he found out how to buy the land and all of that shit.
And he used those millions to buy more land, knowing that the city would keep expanding north. By the time he died in 1848, he was the richest man in America. His fortune was estimated at over $20 million, the equivalent of over 600 million today. But Astor didn't build anything. He didn't create value. He just bought land and waited for the government to make it valuable by building infrastructure nearby. That's not entrepreneurship, that's rent seeking. And it's the same model that real estate dynasties still use today. The Astor fortune funded future generations of political.
So now what they doing is, that's why I bring it back to these schools. See, they already know that once they started the charters, people, and they stopped funding the school district, that it would seem like the charters are better, right? Plus the school district is teaching what they told them to teach. And the charters, yeah, right, they still not teaching that land ownership, none of that. So what's the difference? The only difference is the money and the monopoly, and plus they want to take the real estate, because where the schools are, and turn them into apartment buildings. So if they already know that the people gonna take them out the school, all they gotta do is wait like 3 years and be like, look, the enrollment in the school is down. The kids aren't learning. They're not as smart as the other kids in the city. And it's like, that's because they're not getting the proper funding. So you already know that. But once you see that, then you're like, all right, well, I guess you can get rid of the school, then we have to build a new school. No, they set that shit up.
Political influence. His descendants married into European aristocracy. They shaped New York high society. They controlled cultural institutions like museums and libraries. The wealth that John Jacob Astor extracted from Manhattan real estate speculation created a dynasty that influenced American culture for over a century. And this pattern repeats across every major city. In San Francisco, the Big Four railroad barons, Leland Stanford, Collis Huntington, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker, bought up land along their planned rail routes before the routes were publicly announced. They knew where the value would appear because they controlled where the railroads would go. That's insider trading applied to real estate. And it was completely legal because they wrote the laws. In Chicago, the meatpacking barons like Philip Armour and Gustavus Swift built fortunes through similar methods. They controlled the stockyards. They owned the railroads that shipped the meat. They paid workers starvation wages and sold tainted meat to consumers because there were no regulations. When Upton Sinclair exposed the conditions in the jungle in 1906, people were horrified. But by then, the meatpacking dynasties were already entrenched. The point is that none of these fortunes were built in a vacuum. They were built through deliberate manipulation of government policy, exploitation of labor, and consolidation of monopoly power. And the families that understood how to work the system didn't just get rich once. They built self-perpetuating machines that keep generating wealth across generations. Let's talk about inheritance and how these dynasties maintain power. Because getting rich is one thing. Staying rich for over a century is something else entirely. The key was trusts. Legal structures that allowed families to transfer wealth across generations without losing it to taxes or dilution. The Rockefellers pioneered this with the creation of the Standard Oil Trust in 1882. It wasn't just a business structure, it was a blueprint for dynastic wealth preservation. Here's how it worked. Instead of owning companies directly, the family would create a trust that owned the companies. The trust would be managed by trustees who could make decisions without needing approval from every family member. This allowed the dynasty to act as a unified entity, even as it grew across multiple generations. When John D. Rockefeller died in 1937, his wealth didn't get divided among his children and grandchildren in a way that would dilute the family's power. It stayed concentrated in trusts that continued to grow. The Rockefeller Family Office still manages billions today. They still fund political causes. They still shape policy through foundations. The dynasty didn't die with the founder. It evolved into an institution. The same thing happened with the Mellons. Andrew Mellon served as Treasury Secretary from 1921 to 1932. During that time, he cut taxes on the wealthy and deregulated financial markets. His policies directly benefited his own family's businesses. That's a conflict of interest so obvious it should have been illegal. But Mellon had enough power that nobody could touch him. When he died in 1937, The Mellon fortune was estimated at over $300 million. That wealth funded the creation of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. It funded universities, it funded political campaigns, and it stayed in the family through trusts that are still active today. This is how dynastic wealth works. The first generation seizes power through monopoly and government favor. The second generation consolidates that power through trusts and political influence. The third generation uses that power to shape culture and policy in ways that protect the family's interests forever. And the mythology around these families obscures the mechanisms. We celebrate their philanthropy without asking where the money came from. We admire their business acumen without examining the monopolies that made it possible. We teach their stories as examples of the American dream without mentioning the government subsidies, land grants, and political corruption that created their fortunes. The revisionist history isn't about tearing down successful people. It's about telling the truth. The truth is that the wealthiest families in American history didn't earn their fortunes in a free market. They extracted them from a system designed to transfer public wealth into private hands. And once they had that wealth, they used it to rewrite the rules so that nobody else could do the same thing. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 was supposed to break up monopolies, but it was rarely enforced. When Standard Oil was finally broken up in 1911, the Rockefeller family didn't lose money, they made money, because the breakup created dozens of smaller oil companies and the Rockefellers owned stock in all of them. The value of their holdings actually increased after the breakup. That's the difference between performative regulation and actual accountability. The government made it look like they were cracking down on monopolies while ensuring that the families who benefited from those monopolies stayed rich. And this pattern continues today. The same families that built wealth in the Gilded Age still shape American policy through lobbying, campaign finance, and think tank funding. The mechanisms have evolved, the names have changed, but the system is the same. Wealth begets power, power protects wealth, and the cycle continues. So when you hear the story of American capitalism, when you hear about self-made billionaires and the power of free markets, remember this. Every family that controls America today had no recorded wealth before the 1850s. And the wealth they built wasn't created by markets. It was extracted through monopoly, political corruption, and government subsidies on a scale the world had never seen. That's not the American dream. That's the American reality.
We just screwed up inventory so bad, we're dumping $200 knives for...
I'm done. That was enough. How long was that? An hour. Okay, cool. So, look, yo. That was the first one that we did earlier today. We went over, I think it was history or schools. Yeah. So we went over schools and we went over cities. We went over Tartaria. We have to go from the beginning. We have to start from the beginning on up. So we basically starting in like 1900. I'll say, after I keep saying the beginning 3 times, I'll say 1900. But I want to start around a reset. Because it's all making sense to what's happening now. The same thing that was happening then. Happening now doesn't happen then. Let's see, rap while I'm breaking your chin. The rap game, yeah, I'm in it to win it. I ain't just beginning to get warmed up. Once you start banging on ninjas, they hang that on up.